All right. So, my name is Tom Hare. I am with the Auburn Davis Center for DBT, Dialectical Behavioral Therapy, and I will be teaching about what anxiety is, and how best to use it, as I see my mistype in there. So who I am the assistant program director of Auburn Days DBT. I've been licensed since 2014, so about 10 years now, actually 10 years as of last month. And I have a total of about 16 years of clinical experience working with some of really the toughest teenagers in the state. I started in what were called group homes, which are now called short-term residential therapeutic programs. They are for kids in foster care who, for some reason, can't be placed into a foster home. And you can imagine they are quite difficult at times to figure out. From there, I moved to outpatient mental health and substance use care. And then I moved back to group homes for a while before coming to Auburn Davis DBT about 3 years ago. I've been doing DBT itself for about 6 years because I started implementing it in my previous jobs, and it's something that we find to be very useful. So will start with a activity called mindfulness. So for mindfulness, for those who may not know, this is my definition. This is by no means any kind of official definition. It is the intentional, non-judgmental focusing of one's attention, both internally and externally. So a lot of different definitions of mindfulness kind of focus about being present in the moment, those kind of things. I find those to be a little bit more limiting or not really fully encapsulating everything that there is with mindfulness because sometimes you don't want to be in the moment. Sometimes you want to be out of that moment. And it could be you could be just as mindful if you were pushing your attention to something else than to be in that moment. You're still aware of where you're at. You're still aware of what is going on, but being able to choose, you're not going to focus on that thing. I had a surgery a few years back, and it was I wasn't put under anesthesia or anything like that, but the doctor did a great job of just getting me to talk. He found the thing that I was passionate about and he just set me off to the races. And I tell you, the surgery was so much more pleasant because I wasn't focused on all the feelings and stuff, even though I was numb and all that, but I still kind of feel some things going on and just keeping my mind off of it was great. And that's as much mindfulness as being present or in the moment or wherever else. So that's why I like to use this definition. So next, we're going to do a quick activity, and I want you to just for the next minute pay attention to what's going on in your head. This is often called self-talk, and if you have a piece of paper and a pen, that'd be great. Or if you want to get out your phone, you want to take notes, however you want to do this, but just write down the thoughts that race through your head. Try to capture as many as you can. You won't have to share it, so don't feel like you're going to get judged or we're going to be like, oh my God, you thought about that. Like, you don't have to share any of that. We're just going to share at the end what was the experience of capturing those thoughts. I'm going to have some questions. Again, you don't have to get into any specifics about what it is that you thought about, but I will have some questions about just your experience of this. So I will go ahead and get my timer going. And next minute, go ahead and just pay attention. What are those thoughts? All right, and that's time. All right. So if anybody does care to share, or these are just simple questions that you can reflect on yourself, um, where'd you mind go? Again, 10,000 foot view. You don't have to get into any kind of specifics, but went to work, went to home, went to love life, went to kids, wherever. Uh, how many topics hit your mind in that 1 minute? How easy was it to follow those thought processes? How aware of your self-talk were you prior to this exercise? Did you know that your head was going to bounce around to all these kind of places? And finally, did you notice any body sensations or emotions come up as you were just noticing your thoughts? Okay. So then what is anxiety? So anxiety is a psychological and physiological reaction to a perceived threat in the present and or future. Right? So its purpose is to react to our threats, real or perceived, and to avoid or minimize injury or death to ourselves and to those close to us. From a bare bones level, anxiety is a thing that has kept us alive and that has allowed humans to get to the point that we are today. We did not have anxiety and to be able to look ahead and to consider the dangers that are presented to us, we would not be able to be where we are today. Anxiety is what helped us to develop the behaviors of gathering for the winter. It was the thing that allowed us to avoid the hunting grounds of animals that were our predators. It allowed us to navigate through a whole bunch of different situations and to not continue to make the same mistakes. Anxiety is the thing that has its place, and as we will talk about a little bit later, when you get too much of it, it can be a bad thing. And so, or it can be a detrimental thing, I should say. So physiologically, we see that our heart rate increases. We have increased breathing, and usually that breath gets a lot more shallow, you know, kind of thing. Um, our blood flows away from our center of mass, our torso, and out to our extremities, our arms and our legs. This is pretty simple. This is getting us ready to run or to fight because anxiety is tied into the fight or flight response. Finally, it switches our nervous system. And I'm going to get into a whole thing on that, so I'm not going to bore or get into it again and then have to explain it again later. Psychologically, it causes fight, flight, or freeze. The freeze is usually at the most extreme levels of anxiety. When we're in that moderate to low range, it's the fight or flight mode. I want to run away or I'm getting ready to fight. This can also be something that really gets in the way of relationships because if I'm perceiving a threat in front of me, say my wife or my kids, but they're not actually a threat, I'm going to come off as defensive. I'm going to get into fight mode. And then because I'm in fight mode, they're going to get into fight mode. And then we're going to ping off each other, and that's going to cause things to get a lot worse. And so it's part of that process. It also causes us to hyper focus on the perceived threat. We get tunnel vision. This can be really problematic because that tunnel vision can also limit us from being able to problem solve effectively. And finally, we begin to prepare for the worst case scenario, right? So, um, yeah, just whatever is going to go wrong, right? And what's the very worst thing that could go wrong? And what if I fail to manage to that? And what could go wrong then? What could go wrong, right? It's helping us to really look ahead and play out a few moves ahead in chess. Problem is, we actually don't know what the next move is going to be. So the example of really the utility of this is a real story. I want to say it was from like 2005. The thing's about 19 years old. And it's a story of the 73-year-old grandfather in, I believe it was Western Africa. And he is out on his farm, out in his back 40, all by himself, and this leopard comes upon him and attacks him. And the 73-year-old guy fights off this leopard that is trying to take his life. And he does so by taking his hand, stuffing it into the leopard's mouth, grabbing its tongue, and ripping the tongue out, and kills the leopard by doing that. That is the utility of anxiety. That is the utility of the fight or flight response. Something called adrenaline. That adrenaline allowed him to be a whole lot stronger than he probably normally was. That allowed him to focus on and to problem solve in a moment of time when the rest of him is just trying to figure out like what the heck's even going on. It allowed him that hyper focus, that preparation for the worst case scenario. That's what kept him alive. Question though that I always ask people: when was the last time that you were attacked by a mountain lion? Because that's what we have here in Northern California. For most people, the answer is never. The problem is your body and your mind don't know the difference. When adrenaline kicks in, it starts its domino effect and gets you ready to fight a leopard, to fight a mountain lion. If there's no mountain lion, then what are you doing? And that can oftentimes cause a overreaction. So then we get to the nervous system. I talked about how when we're in anxiety, it switches the nervous systems, right? So you have two nervous systems running through your body. One is called the sympathetic nervous system. Your sympathetic nervous system, this is your activated nervous system, the one that comes on when you're in fight or flight mode. This is your high-end nervous system. This is the one that is designed to operate at peak levels. The analogy: this is your Ferrari, this is your fighter jet. Fastest, quickest, most nimble beast of a thing that you'll ever find. The parasympathetic nervous system. This is your relaxed system. This one is associated with eating, sleeping, and sex. So go back to that case of being confronted with mountain lion. My bet is if you are looking a mountain lion square in the face, you are not thinking about what you're going to eat next. You are not tired, and you are not looking to procreate. There's a reason for that. Those three things are not important in that situation. And so these things turn on when we're relaxed, when we're in a situation that we're safe. And so the sympathetic nervous system, this is our workforce system. This is the one that's designed to be on as much as humanly possible. This is our pickup truck or our 737. Now I'm going to lean into these analogies. So a pickup truck, right, or a 737, those are vehicles that are designed to operate as much as humanly possible, right? Talk about a pickup truck that'll get 300,000 miles when I will be very happy if my car gets 100 to 150,000 miles, right? A 737 is designed to be up in the air as much as humanly possible. Southwest utilizes 737 to get people off the plane, get people on the plane, and be back up in the air as much as it can. The more time it spends on the ground, the less money it makes. Bar none. On the flip side, Ferraris and fighter jets. Ferrari is a beautiful machine. It's also a precision-tuned machine that's not very reliable because you can't always be precision-tuned. So it takes a lot of work. For fighter jets, a fighter jet can take upwards of can take at least 3 hours of maintenance for every hour of flight. So that means they're not designed to be in the air very much. They're designed that when they're in the air, they're going to be able to do things that a 737 would never even dream of. And so we want to make sure that we have the right nervous system for the right situation. Imagine if the U.S. Air Force had nothing but 737s. We would not be the most powerful military in the world. On the flip side, imagine that for every time Southwest Airlines or any other carrier took a flight, that they had to sit their airplane for 3 hours. Airplane tickets are going to get a whole lot more expensive at that point. And so we want to use the right nervous system in the right situation. So then we run into the law of diminishing returns. So the law of diminishing returns is something that we see in economics, and it's also something that is seen in a whole bunch of other places. It's something that is called that is often called the bell curve, right? You see this distribution of things of this upside down U, right? It looks like a big hill. We have it right here in the presentation, right here. So the difference between a medication and a poison is all about dosage, right? You want to get to the right dosage. If you don't have enough anxiety, that could be problematic because anxiety is what encourages us to move, right? Distress, feelings of discomfort. That's what makes us move. When I'm hungry, I go eat. When I'm tired, I go sleep. If I have to use the restroom, right? Not comfortable, but it makes me go to the restroom, right? These are all things that propel us into action. Problem is, so if I don't have enough anxiety, I'm over here and I can't get anything done. I myself am a procrastinator. If you are not aware of this, procrastination, putting off activities until it's almost time to get them done, is not a time management issue. It's not about managing your time, making sure you're spreading things out, all that kind of stuff. It's an emotion management issue. Because for people like me who procrastinate, we end up over here all the time. And then when it's finally time, we don't actually get to here until about an hour before something to do. Um, in college, I tried an experiment. 2 weeks out before a paper was due, I started working on it. And in a 4 hour time frame, I got 1 page done of writing. It was painful. I then put it off, and the night before it was due, I then got back to work on it as I normally do. And in 1 hour, I got 4 pages written. I moved from here to here. Now, say for some reason I had other projects due, or I got into a fight with my girlfriend, or any number of other things get in the way, and my anxiety level goes from here to here. All of a sudden, I can't focus. I can't get stuff done. I'm back down to 1 page in 4 hours. So we want to find this Goldilocks zone. What's the sweet spot for our anxiety to get the most done? Um, Anxiety is not a bad thing. Oftentimes we can demonize or pathologize all anxiety. I know I myself, when I first started as a therapist, used to do this. I used to try to like fix everybody's anxiety and get them never to feel and everything else. Anxiety is actually a very useful thing. And so we want to be able to harness that anxiety. Uh, Without the anxiety, we may not plan or be pushed into action. And on the flip side, an overdose of anxiety is toxic and makes us free. It's literally like the chemicals that get sent off when you have too much anxiety in your body are end up being toxic to your body. And they cause heart problems, cause lung problems, cause all kinds of issues. So you want to get to that right dosage. So the negative feedback loop. Start with our baseline, right? How are we just when we first wake up before the weight of the day hits us, right? When we're mindful, when we are relaxed, when we have that first sip of coffee, that first sip of wine or beer or whatever, right? Like, okay, I'm good. I'm back down to baseline. We then have a trigger. Something hits our brain that makes us go, oh no, right? My to-do list pops up. I check my phone and there's an email from my boss. There's a text from my parents who don't text me overnight, right? Something happens, right? That makes me go, oh no, there's something wrong. We then go into catastrophizing. What's wrong? Something's got to be big. They never do this. Oh my God, I'm going to get fired. They have cancer. Oh my God, right. All those things. Their brain starts going out of control. The kids, right? They're going to get suspended, and then they're getting expelled, and then they're going to end up homeless, and they're going to right. It's like all of a sudden, like from one little thing, they're ending up like drug addicted, homeless, and living on the street or dead, and you don't even know how you got there. That's where your brain goes. And with that comes a strong urge to avoid. I don't want to think about this. This is not fun to think about. I don't like this feeling. I don't like how I feel when I have this feeling. Or I don't like how I feel when I think about this. So then I do avoid. I push it away. I get on my phone to distract myself, right? I play video games. I do any other thing I can to distract myself without the intention of ever coming back to that thought and actually problem solving it when I'm in a less anxious or triggered state. And so when I avoid, though, it does actually help my anxiety. Anxiety goes down. That's a reinforcement. That in behavioral therapy, talk about two ways to modify behavior: punishment and reinforcement. A punishment is something that makes the behavior less likely to happen. A reinforcement is behavior that, or is something that makes the behavior more likely to happen. There are two types of each type of thing. There is positive and negative, both punishment and reinforcement. Positive and negative are not judgments. It's not good things and bad things. It's am I adding something or am I taking something away? So a positive punishment would be a shock collar for your dog who won't stop barking. Every time they bark, makes them stop barking. A positive reinforcement would be when you tell your dog to sit, you give it a treat. A negative reinforcement is taking something away, or a negative thing is taking something away to modify the behavior. So a negative punishment would be to take away your child's phone for not doing their homework. A negative reinforcement would be stop nagging your child when they finally do their homework, because nagging is a positive punishment. Oftentimes we see that the behaviors are very much two sides of the same coin. And so we get reinforced, and that comes back down to baseline. This thing gets us into this loop of every time I have anxiety, I try to avoid, and that reinforces my avoidance, which makes the avoidance urge stronger and stronger and stronger because it works. Problem though, it doesn't work the way you want it to. It's not actually fixing the problem. And, and so we, as a DBT provider, give our clients skills. And I'm going to go over 5 skills for you tonight. So the first one is checking the facts. Checking the facts is just a simple act of looking at the situation and what are the actual facts of the situation? What are the things that are observable, that are fact-based, that are objective, right? Conclusions, judgments, opinions are not fact. And so you need to be able to separate out what's your opinion, what's your conclusion, what's your judgment, what's a fact. Next, talk about validation. Validation is the communication of understanding. There is validation of others, and there is also self-validation. Both are important in dealing with anxiety because validation is actually one of the best ways to regulate our emotions. Feeling understood, feeling heard, feeling seen just helps us calm down. There is exposure. Exposure is a behavior where we purposely trigger ourselves and then fight the urge to give into fight the urge that comes up. And so it's exposure and response prevention. And it is probably the most tried and true and most effective treatment for anxiety that is out there. And so we'll go over that. There's cope ahead. Cope ahead is where we're going to use the power of our anxiety for good. We're going to think ahead about a situation that is going to be that could be possibly problematic, and we're going to figure out how could I effectively cope with this? How could I effectively respond to this rather than just continue to mess up? Finally, there's acting opposite to our anxiety. I might be scared. I might want to avoid. Instead of just simply not acting on it, which is actually a form of opposite action, I might even approach it. Hey, I don't want to think about this thing. So I'm actually going to schedule a time that I'm going to think about it. I'm going to think about it a lot. Or I'm going to talk about it with my spouse, or I'm going to talk about it with my therapist, or I'm going to talk about it with a trusted friend or whoever, right? And I'm going to lean into this thing rather than continue to avoid it. We'll get into all these a little bit more in depth. So, checking the facts, we react to our perception of reality, not to reality itself. Just how it is. If you think you see reality in whole, you are sorely mistaken. All of us only see reality in part because, quite frankly, our brains just filter things out, and so we go through life only seeing the world in part. Some of us see more parts than others, but all of us only see the world in part. Before we respond, we need to check the facts of a situation. Is what I am perceiving actually what's going on? I have interactions with my wife not too infrequently, where I will say something and she will respond back to me and accuse me of saying something. And I will say, I actually did not say that. That was not what I said. And I need to correct that. What she perceived me saying was not what I said. Flip side, I do the same thing to her. She says something and I react to it. That's not what and it may not be what she said. And so I need to check what was it that she actually said? What is the situation? What, right? Going through all that. You also need to check what are the actual probabilities. I have people who are right now. My son is 3 years old, and he is really scared of light. In this area, we don't have much to worry about with light. We don't get lightning storms very often. Once, twice a year, maybe. He just happened to be out in the big storm that hit us a few weekends back, where we just got the downpour put on us, and there was lightning, and that was scary. And so he's trying fixated on, it, and it's understandably worrying to him. As he gets older, if he was still to be scared, I'm going to go over it with him. Like, chance of being struck by lightning are like that's what we use as an example of something that's not likely to happen, right? Lightning struck twice literally means never going to happen, right? Or something that happens very rare. And so just being able to understand what are the actual probabilities of the situation. And sometimes we spend a lot of time thinking about things that have a very low possibility of happening. So our steps checking the facts. First, we're going to identify the emotion that we're having and the urge it is producing. We're going to identify what is the event prompting that emotion and describe the facts that are observed with your senses. You're going to challenge any judgments, absolutes, and black and white descriptions that may be there. You're using the words always or never, unless you are describing the sun rising in the west or east and setting in the west. It's or the opposite, right? For never, there is very little always. People people will at some point always die. People will always at some point pay their taxes. It's about the only other cases of always that people have been able to come up with me. For the most part, though, nothing else. And so, if you're using the words always or never, you're using a judgment, you're using a conclusion, you're using a hyperbole. It's not helping you out. The thing I like to do with always is it's also something that elicits a lot of emotion. Try saying to yourself, "You always do this." It's really easy to get really angry or really emotional in whatever way you're doing it. Now, flip that for something that's essentially the same, 99%. You do this 99% of the time. At least for me, I feel the difference. I can't get as angry with 99%. Always is easy. 99%? No, I feel myself having to push. So check your facts, check the conclusions. Is it really what you're thinking or not? Is it as often as you're thinking or not? Put a number to it as best you can. Be specific. What are the interpretations, assumptions, judgments, and conclusions? Think of other possible interpretations. So I say something, my wife interprets it one way. Well, based on what I said, are there other ways to interpret it? I had a client today, first time I was meeting with them, and I texted them, hey, you jumping on Zoom? Well, their interpretation was I was mad at them. Understandable interpretation, right? Hey, you're late. What's going on? Our work environment would be very upset with this. I wasn't super upset. I was just trying to remind them. And so I had to clarify, hey, when I do this, I'm not mad. I'm just encouraging you to get on, trying to remind you because life's busy. We forget about things, especially when it's on Zoom. So I'm going to shoot out a reminder, and I'm going to do this each and every session. If you're late, at 2 minutes, I'm going to do this. At 4 minutes of doing this, that's what we do. Help to normalize things, right? There's other ways to interpret it. Oftentimes, we interpret things in a more personal or hurtful way than what is necessary. There's an acronym that I got from a colleague of mine years and years ago. QTIP. Quit taking it personal. Even when it's personal, even when they're saying horrible, nasty things about you, it's still not personal because most often it's not about you. It's about them. It's about other experiences they've had. You're just one factor, and unfortunately, you're the one taking the brunt of the punishment. We're going to practice looking at all sides of a situation and all viewpoints. From your child's point of view, what are they right about? When your child's anxious, what is actually scary about the thing that they're going through? What is worrisome? What are the potential threats? For the most part, it won't be none. There is something there. So look at it from their point of view. When they're upset, when you're upset, right? Is there other ways to look at things that aren't so upsetting? And what are the probability of those things actually being true? Do you believe it? If you are finding explanations that you don't believe, they're not going to be helpful explanations. Finally, test your interpretation and assumptions to see if they fit the facts. A lot of life is algebra. I like to think about when I was in high school, uh, a lot of my teachers got the question asked, when am I ever going to use this in real life? Unfortunately, a lot of my teachers did not answer this question very well. And I have found a lot of human behavior is algebraic. A plus B equals C. 2 plus 2 equals 4. If 2 plus 2 equals 5, I need to check my facts because 2 plus 2 doesn't equal 5. And typically that means I'm missing a variable. And I need to figure out what that is. Next, am I assuming a threat? Am I assuming something is going to harm me or the people around me? What is that threat? Label it. Give it a name. By giving it a name, you take its power. I was just reading the Harry Potter books with my 6-year-old daughter. And the first one, Dumbledore discourages Harry Potter from using he who shall not be named, and says, "No, no, no. We're going to use his name because we're not going to give him that power." Label the threat. Take away its power. Assess the probability of that threatening event actually occurring. I'm afraid of lightning is going to strike me. Odds of lightning striking you are 1 in whatever. If I'm inside, it's a whole heck of a lot less. If you're in a car, it's even less. Or it's low as well, right? It's like you can go through this. Boom, 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 boom. And in this case, with the right kind of searches, Google's your friend. What's the probability of being hit by a car? What's the probability of getting hit by lightning? What's the probability of this surgery going wrong? With my daughter, when my wife was pregnant, we got back, we did the pre-screening stuff for Down syndrome, and we got back an initial positive for the screening. And we were freaking out. And then I checked my facts. What does a positive on this test actually mean? A positive on that test means you have a 1 in 362 chance of your child having Down syndrome, which is much higher than the negative people, which was like 1 in like 3,000 or 1 in, however many. But when I first got the positive, we thought it was a 1 in 1. So I had to check the facts. What's the probability of this actually being a threat? And from there, I was able to bring my anxiety and my wife's anxiety down a whole heck of a lot. Finally, think of as many possible outcomes as you can. Not just good ones, not just bad ones, not even just neutral ones. Throw everything at the wall and see what sticks. Finally, we're going to cope ahead, and we're going to go over this in a little bit. If you guys have any questions, by all means, shoot them in the chat, unmute, and throw them out there. I love discussion. So, validation. So, validation is our communication of understanding. It takes empathy to be able to do it because you have to understand what the person is thinking and feeling, and communicate that back to them. At its most basic, it is paying attention. At its most complex, it is fully empathizing, non-judgmentally accepting the other person's point of view as their own. It does not mean that that point of view is correct. You can tell me all day long the sky is green, and I can empathize with you that you think the sky is green. Does not mean that you're wrong, or does not mean that you're right. It does not mean that I will change my view on things. It is not agreeing. It is not condoning. It is not justifying all parts of what the person thinks or feels. It is finding what is true, even if there's only a kernel of truth. Question that comes up all the time: what do I do, or how do I validate a lie? My child lied to me. How do I validate them? You actually think they're lying. The validation is I I can see that you are so worried about how I'm going to respond that you're choosing not to tell me the whole truth. That's validating a lie. I'm not validating anything that they actually said. I'm validating the likely motivation behind why they said it. You really don't want to get in trouble, so you're not telling me the whole truth, huh? Start there. Yeah, they're not lying to you because they're a bad kid. They're not lying to you because they think that they're smarter than you or they think they can get one over on you. They're lying to you because, for the most part, they just don't want to get in trouble, or they don't want you to be upset, or they don't want you to be disappointed in them. The dirty secret that no teenager or kid will no teenager kids will admit, but that no teenager will admit to, they want to make their parents proud. And it sucks when they're disappointed, and that is a hugely powerful thing. So the thing in here next, let me make sure I shared my sound. This is a video on the difference between empathy and sympathy, and is by a woman named Brene Brown.
Is there really no sound? I don't hear anything.
You don't hear anything.
Yeah.
I turned on my sound. Oh, didn't turn on. All right, give me a second. the sharing sound button is not.
So what is empathy and why is it
We can hear.
very different than sympathy?
Cool.
Empathy fuels connection. Sympathy drives disconnection. Empathy, it's very interesting. Teresa Wiseman is a nursing scholar who studied professions, very diverse professions where empathy is relevant, and came up with 4 qualities of empathy. Perspective taking, the ability to take the perspective of another person or recognize their perspective as their truth. Staying out of judgment, not easy when you enjoy it as much as most of us do. Recognizing emotion in other people and then communicating that. Empathy is feeling with people. And to me, I always think of empathy as this kind of sacred space when someone's kind of in a deep hole and they shout out from the bottom and they say, I'm stuck, it's dark, I'm overwhelmed. And then we look and we say, hey, you climb down. I know what it's like down here. And you're not alone. Sympathy is, ooh, it's bad, no. You want a sandwich? Empathy is a choice, and it's a vulnerable choice, because in order to connect with you, I have to connect with something in myself that knows that feeling. Rarely, if ever, does an empathic response begin with "at least." Yeah. And we do it all the time. Because you know what? Someone just shared something with us that's incredibly painful, and we're trying to silver lining it. I don't think that's a verb, but I'm using it as one. We're trying to put the silver lining around it. So I had a miscarriage. Oh, at least you know you can get pregnant. I think my marriage is falling apart. At least you have a marriage. John's getting kicked out of school. At least Sarah is an A student. But one of the things we do sometimes in the face of very difficult conversations is we try to make things better. If I share something with you that's very difficult, I'd rather you say, I don't even know what to say right now, I'm just so glad you told me. Because the truth is, rarely can a response make something better. What makes something better is connection.
So, just some ideas there about how to connect and why empathy and validation are so important, right? And how it drives connection and some different ways uh, to really lean into some of this stuff. All right, so catastrophizing is when we are overdosing on anxiety, we tend to catastrophize. We think of the worst possible situations and that we won't be able to cope. Each time we catastrophize, we reinforce the situation is something too dangerous and must be avoided at all costs. When we expose ourselves to this fear, we don't give in to that urge to avoid or run away. We reprogram our brain. FYI, this will be an example of exposure. Boom. So I do not like spiders. This is my least favorite image I show, and it gives me the heebie-jeebies all the time because I do not like spiders. If there was a spider that landed on my desk right now, there would be silence for quite a bit because I am not going to be next to my desk when there's a spider there. It's just not going to happen. I see this and I feel my anxiety go up. I see myself want to avoid. I see myself not want to look at it. And the more I give in to that urge to not look at it, the more powerful that urge is going to be in the future because I'm reinforcing this is something that is disgusting or is dangerous or should be avoided. So there's some different ways to do exposure. We do this in what's called in vitro exposure. This is that literally means in the lab. And in vitro exposure is what we call cope ahead in DBT. So first, we're going to describe the situation that is likely to prompt the anxiety. We're going to check our facts. So we're going to be specific in describing that situation. We're going to name the emotions and actions likely to interfere with us using our skills. And we're going to think about what is the catastrophe? What is the worst case scenario? Then we're going to decide on what coping or problem solving skills we want to use in the situation. Rather than the downward spiral of this horrible thing's going to happen, and it's going to overwhelm me, and I'm not going to be able to manage it, and so it's going to get worse and worse and worse, right? We are going to use the power of our imaginations and our mind to say, we're going to cope well with this. I'm going to imagine myself doing well at this. And so I'm going to choose specific ways to deal with this, right? Deep breathing, using different communication styles, taking a break, all kinds of different ways that we can use to really help to address that anxiety. We're going to be specific. We're going to write out in detail how we're going to cope with the situation and with emotions and action urges. When I feel this way, I'm going to do this. When I want to act this way, I'm going to do this. I'm going to be as specific as I possibly can. Then I'm going to imagine the situation in my mind vividly as possible. So if I wanted to get over my spider issues, I'm going to imagine vividly that big old spider slowly descending from the ceiling and landing on my desk. I'm going to imagine myself in that situation now, not watching the situation. So I'm not like having this third body or out of body experience. I am in my body, in my chair, with this giant spider on my desk. Feel my heart pumping harder already. And I'm going to rehearse my mind and coping effectively. Take a deep breath. It's more afraid of you than you are of it. Give it space so that it doesn't feel cornered and then attack. Right? I'm going to walk myself through what am I going to do to effectively cope with this giant spider on my desk. We're going to rehearse our actions, our thoughts, what we say, and how we say it. All right, so I'm gonna rehearse calling 911 or calling animal control and saying there's a giant ass spider in my house that shouldn't be here, is not from this area. I need somebody to come do something with it. I'm gonna rehearse coping effectively with any new problems that might come up. The spider disappears. The spider crawls towards me. The spider jumps at me. The spider gets on me. What am I going to do? Again, through this, the effective coping skill might be to smash the spider, or it might be to run away from the spider. The spider is actually trying to attack me. The effective coping skill is to run away, because at that point, I'm actually in danger. But the spider is just sitting there, and this time it doesn't even notice me. I'm actually not in danger. We're going to rehearse coping effectively with the most feared catastrophe. The spider bites me. All right. Call 911. Or get my wife and we get into the car and she drives me to the ER and I get an antivenom and chances are I'm okay. Yeah, I'm going to be in pain. Yeah, there might be some stuff. Yeah, I'm probably never going to come back into this house ever again. The house now belongs to the spider. Just how it is. And so I gotta go move in with my parents or her parents, or I gotta figure out schooling for my kids. I gotta do all of that, right? I gotta now deal with this catastrophe. And I can't because I can. Coping with the catastrophe does not mean fixing the catastrophe, does not mean undoing the catastrophe. I don't magically get the spider out of the house. I don't make the spider disappear. If that spider is leaving the house, it's because I or somebody else is picking it up and getting it up or shooing it up. And then I'm going to practice relaxation and rehearsing over and over and over again, because I'm going to start pairing being triggered with learning to relax, and that this is my way of decreasing my anxiety. Not to avoid, but to look at that spider dead in the eye and take deep breaths. I'm not avoiding it. I'm managing my anxiety, and that's how I'm going to learn this. Then we have offset action. This is what we call in vivo exposure. In vivo means in real life or in life. So in vivo exposure, or so offset action is feeling those urges to act and either A, not acting on them, or B, acting completely opposite to that. So when you're angry, you have the urge to attack. Opposite action, all the way, would be to be kind. When you're fearful or anxious, you have the urge to run away or avoid. All the way opposite action would be to approach. When you're sad, most people have a urge to isolate. Opposite action would be to seek out connection. Just different ways to do things. And it's breaking the connection between how you feel and what you do. Because for too many of us, how I feel dictates how I act. That doesn't have to be true. So we're going to identify our emotion. We're going to check our facts. We're going to identify the action urges. Same thing as the first, as the other skills. And then we're going to ask in our wise mind, in our balanced place, in our unfreaked out place, is expression or acting on this urge going to help the situation? Is running away actually going to help me be safer? If no, we're going to do whatever we can to not act on that urge. We're going to identify the opposite action. We're going to choose what we think is the most effective of those actions to do. And then we're going to repeat acting opposite until our brain is reprogrammed. What we find in the research, at least the latest that I'm aware of, which might be about 10 years old now, if you can simply sit through an exposure for 35 minutes, even if none of the calming skills, none of the calming skills, none of the good feel skills do anything, after 35 minutes, your brain begins to rewire. Because the chances of you being in a imminent, something is about to happen, I'm in danger situation for 35 minutes just isn't really a reality. Either you're going to take action, run away or fight, or the trigger is going to disappear. Right? You're out walking on a trail and a mountain lion comes out. The mountain lion's not going to stare at you for 35 minutes. At some point, either mountain lion's going to attack you, or it's going to move on and go, yeah, you're too big and too much of a hassle for me to deal with. Any questions, comments, cries of shock, outrage, or protest?
I have a question. Since we're talking about coping ahead and the Vivo and in whatever, um, when is the best time to actually communicate or to address this pertaining if there's something like I see like an anxiety or like a sign and symptom of anxiety from my kid.
Um, if you're seeing the anxiety, I would say, especially like if you're able to see it and catch it in the moment, communicate then, right? And that's when you're practicing that validation piece, right? Hey, I I see a lot of I see you pacing, I see your knees bouncing. I see the look on your face, and it looks like you're really worried or anxious about something. Is there something you want to talk about? Right? Just be able to communicate that, um, to pull up, your the facts that you have. I see you anxious. where your knees bouncing and you can't get still, you're not falling asleep, um, 4 or 5 times a week, and I'm really worried about being able to uh, find that balance and balance those kind of things out can be very helpful. And so I would say communicate it as best you can. Um, that being said, it can be tricky for some people. It can actually be more anxiety provoking to have that be pointed out. And so it might be bringing that up when they're not clearly already anxious. So maybe first thing in the morning on a weekend when you guys have a chance to do some downtime and have some one-on-one time or some family time or whatever, and then talking about it. Because when we're already in the moment, that can feel very overwhelming, especially to a teenager, to talk about that kind of situation. And so being able to talk about when they're at baseline, but and make sure you have specific, right? Not just you seem anxious all the time. But I'm not anxious all the time, so I don't know what you're talking about. Right? So, it's Wednesday night. Hey, you remember Tuesday afternoon when you got home and we were talking about the next day at school, and I just saw you kind of like just really picking at your hair a lot, and I interpreted that as you're really worried about something, and I'm wondering, I've been seeing that a lot, like maybe like 3 to 4 times a week, and I'm wondering if anxiety is really becoming a problem for you. Be able to again, normalize, right? Be able to share your own anxiety, your own stuff, right? I worry about X, Y, Z, and I have some science, and here's how I learn to deal with my anxiety, or here's what I'm doing to deal with my anxiety, and learn all these things because it's really hard, and being able to normalize can go a really long way as well. Does that answer your question?
Yes, definitely. Thank you. I like that comment that it needs to be normalized so that, yeah. But it's easier said than done.
It is. Um, one thing that I joke about with my wife quite a bit is a good probably 90% of people I meet, I could probably diagnose with some sort of anxiety disorder. Um, Anxiety is a big thing, especially in American life, and it's not talked about very well. And the pathologizing and saying that there's something wrong with you or whatever doesn't really help. And so being able to normalize it and to share for yourself, there within DBT, we do a deeper dive in validation, and I think I do this in one of our future ones if we end up having it. We call it six. We have 6 levels of validation. Really, the first 3 are different components of things to do, and then the last 3 are different levels of connection to the person. So the first level is just to pay attention. Your kid's talking to you, stop whatever you're doing, or if you can, and give them your full attention. If you can't, that's also okay. Tell them, hey, I can't give you my full attention. Can we talk after dinner? In 5 minutes, can we talk in wherever time period, right? Can we talk about this here then? Because I want to give you my full attention. I have to finish this email. I have to get dinner on. I have to do this. I have to do this. I want to give you my full attention. I can't. So can we wait until I can? Because I really want to hear you. Uh, the second thing is just parrot back what they're saying. They tell you, yeah, Joni was just being really mean to me today. Oh man, I hear just Joni's acting really mean to you. That's so hard, right? You're just parroting back what you heard. The last kind of that additional thing on that is take a stab. What's being left unsaid, right? Joni was so mean to me today. Oh, Joni being mean to you has got to be so hard. She's like your best friend, and it's got to make you feel so lonely, right? You're stepping in, you're taking a shot at what's being left unsaid. The other 3 levels are to normalize, to help them connect that they are not alone in the world. oftentimes when we feel invalidated, when we are not seeing that we are understood, we feel like there's just something uniquely wrong with us, that we're broken. And that's no fun. And so by normalizing, you get to say, you're not broken. You're not broken. There's not something wrong with you. It's pretty normal. Like a lot of people deal with this. Uh, the next level is to put context to it. Um, if your child is worried about school and they are gunning for an Ivy League school, or they struggle in school and they're not good at school. You- yeah, like I see that you're really worried about school, and it's just been such a hard thing for you, even though that's not, maybe they didn't say that, right? But you're bringing in these previous conversations, this previous knowledge of them to show not only do I understand now, but I understand what you said before. And I'm bringing all that in, right? And you're really building this connection with you. The last one is to either have humility or be human. And that's to share your own stuff. Yeah, I struggle with it with anxiety too. I worry about about you kids. School was really tough, and I felt like I had to get perfect grades. And right, you're just sharing your own experience, and that's the connection of I. You're not broken. You're not weird. You're not different. You're just like me. You connect with them on that, and that can really be very helpful in relieving some of that angst and worry around admitting that there might be a problem.
Thank you for sharing that one.
All right. Are there any other questions?
I have another one. Since when we started, you were saying that if we do not have a lot of people, now you most likely the other weeks would be canceled. So in that sense, were you thinking of another set of this kind of educational series or whatever?
So I'm not entirely sure. So I need to have a conversation with our partners, PCOE, Placer County Office of Education, and work with them on what is it that they would like to do. Again, it's a lot of people are reporting that they're getting really low turnout for these kind of things, and so we're trying to figure out how can we best connect to people so that we can pass on this information. We know that mental health is a really big issue, and at the very least, 6 or 7 o'clock on a Wednesday or a Thursday just doesn't seem to be working for people. And so trying to figure out if there's a better time or a better place or different kind of settings or different ways to get out this information. Again, I'm recording this even just so I can put this on YouTube and people can interact with it on YouTube. That's at least another way for people to get that information and hopefully be able to put some of this stuff into practice and get some additional help or support.
Gotcha. Okay, thank you.
Real quick, I do have a evaluation. If you guys would, it's both for the grant that is paying for this, as well as just gives me really good feedback on like how can I improve as a presenter and giving this information. Hopefully, how to get more people in through the door and support more people. And so if you guys could just click on that, complete the evaluation, I would really appreciate it. And that would really help me out a lot. And then again, I'm happy to answer any more questions. I had scheduled to tell 7:30, and I am also happy to let you guys get back to your families sooner because I can only imagine trying to step away for an hour and a half from your families has got to be tough.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you for this opportunity to be here. I'll hear back from any information from you if just in case we'll proceed or whatnot. But this topic for me is very important because I have a kid that's having this kind of things, and I would think that as a parent, it would benefit me and my kid basically. So, but thank you for this evaluation too. I'll get into it. Thank you so much, Tom.
Thank
Have
you.
a good night.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.